Well, it's the first Thursday in September, September the 4th, 2025. So we've got another live episode. Really happy to have Greg Wycliffe back on the show. And we'll talk a bit about the Dominion Society that he's recently got involved in and a bunch of other things. We'll see what comes up in the chat as well. So I'm sure we're going to have a lot to talk about. So let's get right into it. Good evening. My name is Nicholas Wansbutter. I'm a lawyer in Stratford, Ontario, and welcome to Don't Talk TV. And Greg, welcome back. It's been a while since we've had you on, or since I've been on your show. I know I've been trying to make this happen for a while, so I'm.
It has. Yes, it has been a while. Thanks for having me. So much has gone on. It feels like so much has gone on just in the past couple of weeks in terms of crime, related to immigration, and just outrageous stuff happening in Canada. And I guess, as a practicing lawyer, your head just must be spinning with all this stuff.
Well, it's actually not spinning just because I'm old enough now and I've seen enough of this stuff. And I think I've seen this coming for so long that I'm kind of like, yep, that's about what I expected to start happening at about, well, I probably thought it was going to be, maybe it's a little bit the speed that things seem to be picking up is maybe what's a little bit surprising to me. But I mean, you've been really busy yourself. We'll get into what's going on with Canada, but that kind of what's going on in Canada is also why you're doing a lot of things you're doing. I know you're filming a documentary that you just wrapped up the filming on that, and then you dove right into the Dominion Society. So maybe let me give you a few minutes to talk a bit about those things, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah. So it's been over a year now that I've been working on this documentary about free speech in Canada. The working title is The Hate Network. And it really takes a lot of what we saw during COVID, during the convoy. It talks about people who speak out against transgenderism in schools or just as a nurse, and all sorts of different examples. And it kind of has a common thread of, well, our institutions have very specific politics, is very specific ideology, and it will, almost like clockwork, target people who are either loud enough, effective enough at inspiring others to kind of oppose the ruling ideology. And we've seen this throughout history, and we've kind of bringing history into it. We also target an organization called the Canadian Anti-Hate Network, as they are responsible for propagating, in some cases, lies about people and a lot of half truths and a lot of just demonizing Canadian citizens, basically to make people hate one another. Very ironic that their name is Anti-Hate. Anyway, but that's going to be, I'm still working on a lot of that, still working through hours of interview footage. But yes, it's also kind of congruent, or kind of fits, that I've joined the Dominion Society, as we're seeing, especially in the UK, people who criticize immigration the wrong way, people who talk about immigration the wrong way, are also people putting up the wrong flag or the wrong sticker are getting targeted and persecuted by the police for having specific politics. So I thought it would be appropriate to hop on the board of Dominion Society, because I think that will be, or that already is, a front of contention with these kind of insane Western governments, where they're persecuting their own citizens for criticizing public policy. It's quite insane. But yeah, there it is. There's our homepage.
Yeah, sure. Put that up there so we can see what we're talking about here. But yeah, I mean, I don't think Canada is yet where the United Kingdom is. I mean, people aren't yet being thrown in jail for 2 to 3 years simply for protesting, but you can see it happening other places. You have to take the cautionary tale and not think, oh, this could never happen here, especially when our government seems to have a lot of the same, you're talking about ideologies or institutional ideologies. It seems to be the same beliefs that are required to be held for teachers, nurses, I mean, lawyers. I think there's to an extent, there's that. Any of these professional organizations, they've got us with the whole ethics thing, because they've now turned this into a moral thing, that it's unethical and immoral to hold a view other than the accepted one.
Yeah, and that's kind of been for quite a long time. I think that the kind of culmination of that was having Justin Trudeau as our Lord and Savior and Prime Minister, and he really mainstreamed, and he kind of unfortunately was effective at creating, far left progressivism into the Canadian ethos, i.e., diversity is our strength, and if you disagree with multiculturalism, it's a sin. And that's changing now, thankfully, which is giving me a lot of hope. But back in 2019, my inception into politics was running for the PPC in 2019. If you criticized immigration or multiculturalism back then, this was like the climate election. It was the climate change election when Greta Thunberg literally came to Canada like a week before the election happened in Canada, almost to like help the sort of liberal campaign. Because that was the whole craze. Anyway, but criticizing immigration back then made you a heretic. I was in a very left-leaning riding. I was in Parkdale High Park. I had an 18-year-old volunteer intimidated by a man twice his size, racist, get out of here, racist. And I'm like, sir, do you mind? He's 18, he's a volunteer. Like, do you want to talk about anything? But like rapidly, this person could calm down and have a conversation. Yeah, it was wild. It was wild how, like you said, how it's like it's seen as a moral thing. And yeah, that's unfortunately, like that is baked deep into the cake. Like that has been what I say, like generational lies, like lies that have been told for basically generations, or at least since the end of World War II. How deeply this sort of like open society has been pushed upon us. But even over the past few years, the programming is breaking really quick, because when you see some of this egregious stuff go on, this kind of disgusting stuff that triggers that disgust in people, it makes you start to think, it breaks the programming. It makes you start to think about the Canada you grew up in and how it's different, and how this person is not the same as this person, and people who came from this country are not the same as the people who came from this country. And actually there are kind of patterns, there are kind of like behavioral patterns that are significant. And if we want to have a country that we're going to feel comfortable in, we need to start talking about this stuff.
Right. Well, I mean, behavior is different because beliefs are different. There seems to be this concept or thought that, everyone holds the same values, regardless of where they're from, regardless of their background. But no, not everyone. People don't all hold the same values. I mean, I think maybe people fall into that because there's this concept that Canada is this post-Christian state, and therefore Christianity had nothing to do with why Canadians are the way they are, and therefore everyone's going to be like that. But this is just one layer of things, but just taking the Christianity aspect, you take people from countries that never had any influence of Christianity, they're just going to have different values because they're coming from a different system.
Yeah, and I think that it's I remember a young man named Tyler L. Russell. He's like a Zoomer. He was like really into like Nicholas Fuentes way back in 2019. And he told me, and back then I was still more of like a libertarian minded person, but he told me something that always freaked me out, it freaked me out at the time, but it's totally true, which is tribalism. The rise of tribalism is inevitable. And that's what we're seeing. That's what we're seeing with this kind of multiculturalism experiment playing out in different Western countries. And like if you import enough people who have these strong convictions to their foreign religion, foreign people who are loyal and passionate about their foreign religion, that's who they are. That's just who they are. That's what they do. And they're going to, if their convictions are stronger than the host populations, then, they're going to start to assert their dominance culturally because they have a stronger conviction. Like it's not even like, oh, a good thing, a bad thing. It's just like the way it is. Like that's just the way things are going to play out. And that's why at Dominion Society, we are trying to build that conviction of like, hey, we are a Christian European nation. That's what we are historically. We actually have a very detailed history that details our ethnogenesis, that Canadians are an ethnicity if you just look at the historical facts of the matter. And this has triggered so many people, Nicholas. It's insane. Just listing historical facts has triggered so many people calling us woke right, people saying that we want a white ethno state. And it's like, folks, we're in a situation right now where there's hundreds of thousands, potentially millions of people who should be deported based on our existing laws. And we clearly don't have the political will to actually enforce those laws. And people want to get all alarmed about like white supremacy and all this stuff. And it's like we have children getting raped. we have people getting executed in their own living rooms from burglars. And then these same people are literally worried about like, too many white people thinking their identity is important, as if that's a problem. It's insane.
Which is always, I mean, there's a few points there to try to break down. I mean, the whole what is a Canadian thing and how it's like now you're some evil racist or wanting a white ethno state. I mean, I'm old enough that I grew up in the 80s. I mean, in the 80s, people generally had a concept that there is such a thing as being a Canadian. We had those heritage minutes. I mean, those are fantastic. Any people who are younger than me probably never saw them, but you'd have these little 1-minute things during commercial breaks where they'd give you some little story from Canadian history. And it was along the type of stuff I pulled up the What is a Canadian page on the Dominion Society, because it was the type of stuff that you talk about here about Canadians being descendants of the pioneers who built this country. And that's what those heritage minutes were all about. It was a lot about pioneers and their different stories, people that fought in World War I, people that fought in World War II. And I mean, that was presented. This is our heritage. That's what called heritage moments. I mean, these are Canadians. This is Canada. This is what we're about. And you could clearly get the values, that there were Canadian values as well.
Yeah. And what I like about the approach of Dominion Society is it really does come from a place of self-love and self-respect more than anything. And what I love about that as a core is that the natural conclusion of being self-respecting and loving yourself and wanting the best for your people is, at this point, is remigration, is to maybe tweak the laws a little bit, tweak the incentives in our immigration system to reverse the flow of immigration. If we respect ourselves, if we love ourselves as a nation, and for anybody else who respects and loves the Canada from before and wants that back, then it's kind of a no-brainer to support what we're doing at Dominion Society, And I think that is an important distinction to make, because sometimes the energy can be very anti-immigration. It can be very kind of hateful and have like a resentment energy of just like, I want these people out of here type thing, which is totally relatable, totally understandable where that comes from. But I think that making the slight tweak in energy change of coming from the place of loving our nation and respecting its history and starting there and making it very clear that, this is not like an anti-immigration thing. This is a pro-Canadian thing. This is a pro wanting the nation to survive, a pro wanting to respect the history of this country, and anybody who lives here respecting the history of this country, which I think, like, what is so radical about that? Right?
Well, it shouldn't be radical. And I often try to get people to do the thought experiment, like take any non-European based country in the world and you'd ask, like, is it okay for them or good for them to be proud of their heritage? Well, of course it is. And I agree. Of course, like Indians should be able to be proud of their heritage and their country. Chinese should be able to be proud of theirs, anyone. And same thing with Canadians. And people try and say, oh, well, Canada's only been around since 1867, except, as we know, yeah, officially 1867, but really the Canada we're talking about was around for a long time before that. I mean,
Absolutely.
pioneers and settlers building what became Canada, they were here for several hundred years before that.
No, you know, I want to touch on that point just to make it's such an interesting comparison, because if there's this video that talks about here is the Ghanan culture from Ghana, these are the Ghanan people, here's what they did, here's what they do, here's their history, here's their lineage, here's their ancestry. You post that on CBC, and there's going to be these liberals in tears of how beautiful it is, how beautiful these people are. And then we do the same thing at Dominion Society about what a Canadian is. And they're like, what is this? White ethno-nationalist? What is this? Oh my gosh, this is disgusting. Yeah.
Nazism.
And it speaks to, like I said earlier, the programming, how deeply ingrained the programming is. It's not just the past like 8 years or 10 years of Trudeau. It's kind of been generational. It's been some decades of this. That's kind of slowly but surely been seeping into our education, politics, and mainstream media.
Yeah, it's accelerated in recent years, but this is nothing new. And I mean, I would say, like, I don't know if you can ever pick a precise starting point, but I mean, you go back to the two world wars at the beginning of the 20th century, where millions of young men died. I mean, what was World War I, in my view, was about doing away with the old order. That was the first break from the past, is we need to crush the last of the old monarchies and make the world safe for democracy, as Woodrow Wilson said, to usher in this new era. And then World War II was kind of part two of that. The propaganda from World War II is the gift that keeps on giving, right? Because now you can paint anyone who's proud of their heritage, oh, well, they're like the Nazis. Because the Nazis, they were into their heritage, and look what they did. They wanted to dominate the world. So clearly anyone who's proud of their heritage, it's European, they're like the Nazis. They're going to want to take over the world and kill millions of people. So therefore, we can't be like that. We have to be multicultural. We have to be ashamed of our own heritage. And so, and then it's, I think it's progressed. It started out slowly. Like if you went back in time to the 50s, you would compare it today, you'd say, hey, this seems totally different. But I think the seeds were already there. And as one of our viewers said, I agree that the getting rid of the red ensign was a red flag. I mean, that was a piece of this, disconnecting us from our heritage, and taking this flag that had history to it and has symbolism to it of who we are, right? I mean, it fits perfectly with what your Dominion Society's definition of a Canadian, but we had to get rid of that and move forward in a new direction.
Yeah, in terms of the significant, I'm still learning about the specifics of this, but from what I understand, the significant policy changes, we'll say, and attitude shifts in Canada happened between 1965 and 1975. That's when official multiculturalism policy started in 71, I believe, and that's around the time that the immigration policy started to open up. And of course, the flag change. The flag change, I think, was either 64 or 65 when they changed to the leaf, the red leaf, where the red ensign does signify the founding stock, the English, the French, the Scottish, the Irish, and of course the Union Jack. And but I did want to go back to what you were saying about how the gift that keeps on giving, the kind of the programming or the messaging since World War II. And this is a very I think this is, if people are kind of wondering, oh my God, what's happening? The world's so insane, like all these lies everywhere. I think it actually is really important to understand this sort of phenomena that has happened since World War II, because I do think it is very foundational to what we're dealing with now. A great book on this is Return of the Strong Gods, about nationalism, populism. It's R.R. Reno, but it can be a little bit of a dry read sometimes, but it's pretty good in terms of summarizing the different popular leftist thinkers who really kind of steered the ship right after World War II. And I won't get into the dryness here. I'll try to freshen it up and make it more relatable. But if I were talking to a center leftist, for example, or even a far leftist or a communist, and they said, Greg, why are you far right? Like, that's crazy. Why are you far right? Why are you this, why are you in this radical category? I would explain to them that there are generational lies that have been told to Western society, mostly since the end of World War II, probably a little bit before then, but they really got popular after World War II. And these lies are continuing to kind of live on and cause a lot of problems. And I feel that the far right are the only people who are actually addressing these lies. And in summary, they would be that, nations are a real thing. Nations are a real thing based on, our shared ancestry of a people. Race is a real thing that has significance to it as well. And there's probably a few others, but like those two alone are something that has been definitely undermined since the end of World War II. And it's this sort of liberalism that is still with us, that even a lot of conservatives still embody. They're still kind of, they've been programmed to be liberal their entire lives, and they have a hard time accepting the fact that race is a real thing and nation is a really significant thing. Unfortunately, we have a lot of conservatives who are kind of just stuck up on we got to fix our economy thing. But now we have
fiscal conservatism only.
Yeah, which is brutal. I think the best piece of propaganda, or the best thing that's helping us right now, is, quite frankly, just some of the egregious behavior of people who are some people who are non-white in Canada, or just even in America too. Doing these, killing people on the highway, doing a U-turn while you're driving a huge transport truck and not showing an inkling of remorse afterward. That shocks people. Not even so much the car accident, but the look on his face afterward. There's been so many clips over the past 3 years that have been going viral, and this is really, it's exposing that lie that there is a difference between nations. There is a difference between different racial people. Who are we kidding? And it's a pretty exciting time, because people have been programmed so effectively to not look at this, not pay attention to this. But that confrontation is obviously happening. And I think what's great about Dominion Society is it offers people a calm, cool, collected solution and a little bit of an explanation and justification as to why it's the best path forward, being remigration, of course.
Yeah, so we'll talk about remigration in a minute, but just you kind of touched on something that I want to go back to, of what exactly is the Dominion Society? What is it meant to be? Is it a lobby group, or what are you envisioning it to be?
Yeah, Dominion Society is a vanguard movement. So it wants to inspire and influence not just political parties, but it wants to inspire the Canadian culture, the culture of the Canadian people. And it wants to frame Canadian nationalism as being a top priority, along with promoting remigration. So we want to be influencing every conversation that we can, every person that we can, to culminate in an uncompromising voting bloc. A voting bloc. We eventually want to have 1 million Dominion Society members across Canada. And it's like, hey, political party, hey, political candidate, we're only going to vote for you unless you, we're only going to vote for you if you push these remigration policies. So if you want 1 million votes for your party, then maybe you should include that in your policy, and maybe you should start talking about this. And some people, I think, are incorrect to assume that it's just a right-wing thing. I think there's actually a very growing appetite for remigration policies coming from the left. Let's talk about the temporary foreign workers. How does that, if you're a workers' rights guy from the NDP, how does importing cheap foreign labor factor into your politics if you're constantly going to be importing cheap foreign labor to lower and lower and lower wages. If you're a true, like, leftist who cares about the worker, you would have a problem with that. And also, we've seen from various liberal politicians them actually almost being more aggressive in terms of saying we actually do need to deport these people. So I like that it's focused on remigration and Canadian nationalism, but it's also sort of broad in terms of how we are going to be pressuring every single political party, everybody in the political conversation, of how this should be the priority for our nation.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting to say about how some liberals, as in Liberal Party of Canada, have been even more aggressive. I think it's because the Liberal Party of Canada, unlike the Conservatives, they're actually willing to change their policies a bit if they think it's going to earn them votes, whereas the Conservative Party seems to just be dead set on being as weak and inoffensive as possible, regardless of what the people actually want. And I focus on using the party names because I think I like the European terminology more, because in Europe, the Conservative Party of Canada would be considered liberals based on their policy by the European definition of liberal versus conservative, and the Liberal Party of Canada would be considered socialists in Europe. And I think that is actually more accurate. The Liberal Party of Canada are socialists. And I mean, fiscal conservatives, that is classical liberalism. And I guess that's really all that sort of we get from the Conservative Party. I don't even know if we would have that. When you look at conservative premiers, I'm not seeing a whole lot of fiscal conservatism.
I just realized I was on the wrong microphone. I probably sound a lot better now. Sorry about that. Shoot.
Yeah, you do sound better, but it wasn't too bad before.
Okay. Yeah, no, it's weird how all the words kind of get mixed up. Is the Liberal Party liberal? They're more authoritarian than anything else.
Well, that's what socialist, I think, is more appropriate in that vein, because socialists tend to be authoritarian because that's the only way you can implement socialism.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. I'm a broken record when it comes to this Conservative Party. I just do not think they are strong enough. I think that the amount of outrage, like, can we talk about this "do not" or "just comply" clip? Can we play that?
Sure. Yeah, we got that one here because I know lots of people have been asking about it. So let me.
It's outrageous, man.
Yeah, it's we'll get this going here.
Make his own statement and his own mind up about that. What I would say is, we'll follow the laws as they're written. The laws change, we'll change with the laws. But as it stands, we know the best defense for most people is to comply. As you've just heard, a number of safety recommendations will allow for those that are victimizing members in the community to leave and not harm anyone. It sometimes can fall on deaf ears when members feel like they have to take matters into their own hands. And the only thing I'd say is, if we are going to rely on our community members to take matters into their own hands to solve this problem, we have all failed our community. So I'll leave political comments to the politicians and let them have those conversations. But for now, the laws are written, we'll follow those laws.
But I guess you are hoping that people kind of heed your advice more than the premiers here, that if they do find themselves in this situation, that they should do the best they can to kind of stay away from the criminals. And
my advice is to rely on our police service, call 911 immediately, and let us take it from there. We see more often than not, when people comply, that injuries are not happening, and people are not victimized in terms of injury, or in this case, unfortunately, we've seen the loss of life in some of these incidents.
Damn, it feels good to be a gangster, dude. If you're a gangster in Canada right now, you're like, yeah, that's right. Comply to me, the lawbreaker, the criminal. Just
Mhm.
comply to me being a violent thug breaking into your home. I rule. I am the ruler in Canada. I am the burglar. You must comply to the burglar. It's hard to put into words the like the the amount of outrage that this should be met with. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like it's hard to even kind of conceive how outraged people should be.
Yeah,
But
although it seems that it is starting to get a little bit of traction, and unfortunately, I think it's the way things often are. Things need to get bad before people will start getting upset. Because, I mean, in fairness to the chief, there, he's actually correct about when he's talking about the laws the way they are. I think we've seen, well, there's a whole bunch to unpack there. I mean, we've seen the way the police and prosecutors enforce the law. The law of self-defense in and of itself, I looked at this way back in episodes 18 and 19 of Don't Talk TV. So if people want to look at that for a bit more in depth, you'll see that people generally are acquitted by their fellow Canadians or even judges if it's not a jury trial, but they still get prosecuted. And our law is also, I mean, don't shoot the messenger. I strongly disagree with this, but the law in Canada is possession of any object for the purpose of self-defense is in and of itself the crime of carrying a weapon for a dangerous purpose. So, and there's case law from back in the 80s and 90s. The 70s is when it started changing, where the judges started saying, wait, we don't, they straight up said, this isn't a direct quote, paraphrasing, but they said, we don't want people defending themselves because that actually makes the community more dangerous. That was the view that judges have been taking since it started turning in the 70s and into the 80s. I talked about that in, Richard, I'll get you to put the link. I think is what, episode 41 or somewhere around there.
so
Might
what
be
about
worth-
this?
Okay, but-
This guitar? Is that like a weapon for a dangerous purpose? If someone broke into my house and I used that to like bash their head in,
Well, it would become a weapon if you use it to hit someone. Like if you're just carrying it around as a guitar, it's not a weapon.
Right.
But if you are carrying it specifically because I'm going to use this to defend myself with it, now it's become a weapon for a dangerous purpose in the eyes.
right? But it's in the context of a burglary in my house.
Right. So it was still a weapon, and then it comes down to, is this a reasonable use of force? Which again, people, after they've been punished by the process of being arrested and prosecuted, they usually get acquitted in the end. The problem is getting there, and that's why I have to say about Doug Ford talking about how, people should be allowed to defend themselves. I'm outraged by what the police are doing. It's like, well, Mr. Ford, it's your prosecutors who are prosecuting this. Prosecutors in Ontario and probably most provinces, but I know for sure Ontario, they have a whole policy manual for what they're supposed to do with different types of cases. They're not allowed to drop drunk driving charges, for example, unless there's like some clear problems with it. Then they can offer a careless driving under the Highway Traffic Act. Generally, I don't even know if they can drop them outright. So Doug Downey, the Attorney General, Doug Ford's Attorney General, he could add to that policy manual that, we think people have the right to defend themselves. If it's inside a home, we're not prosecuting it. He could. That's obviously not happening. So, there's a little bit of actions speak louder than words, I think. And so that goes back to, to be a little bit fair to that police chief. He's not completely wrong when he says the law is this way. And, I think he's trying to tell people, and I'm not necessarily saying that he's like trying to help us, but I think he's actually factually correct in saying that, yeah, if you defend yourself, we're probably going to arrest you. And the law's, the law is the law, until it changes, etc. As he was saying, I think the law does need to change, but the policies and how the current law is enforced could also change. And the people who are in charge, they're just talking to the media instead of actually changing it, as far as I can tell.
I think what bothers me the most about that clip is that it was a message to potential victims of a burglary and telling them to just accept it. It's like, I feel like if you're a good police chief, you should be intimidating the criminals If you're a good police chief, you should be
Yeah.
trying to strike fear into the hearts and minds of the people breaking the law.
Yeah,
Because instead the message was just comply with the burglars. I'm a big tough police chief. Look at all my accolades on my chest. Telling my own citizens to just crawl up in a ball and get their shit kicked in. It's like, what do you think? I think you kind of just mentioned it or alluded to it. Like, if you had a magic wand as a lawyer and you could correct the current laws we have, we'll just say specifically, because I know there's lots of changes you might want to make, but if it was just for specifically the break and enter stuff where a Canadian citizen is not allowed to defend themselves, if you could wave a magic wand, what would the Wansbutter wand do?
I mean, the easiest one, specifically what we're talking about, I would put in a castle doctrine where I'd change the self-defense laws where it says you don't even have to be restricted by reasonable force. If someone if someone has invaded your home, you're allowed to use whatever force you deem necessary. The way you'd have to work, I think what I would do is, instead of making it a defense, because that's the way the police always word it, to say, well, they still committed the offense. Self-defense is a defense, but you have to raise that at trial. I would change a lot of the sections of the criminal code in and of themselves to make it not even an offense. For example, like have written right into assault, aggravated assault, discharge of firearm in there, that right into an exception. So for example, assault is any application of force without the other person's consent. Add a word in there that any application of force without the other person's consent, so long as they're not inside your residence or something along those lines. I obviously haven't fine-tuned a precise wording, because the devil is always in the details. So it would have to be precisely worded, because you don't want situations where people are, say, luring people into their homes so they can do a murder and get away with it. So it would have to be that they broke into the house before that aspect of it gets triggered. So there would have to be some nuance to it, but I think that, and totally overhauling our sentencing regime, I think would also be an important piece of it. Although I think, number one, people need to fear that, hey, if I break into that house, that guy could kill me and nothing's going to happen to him. Where criminals do not have that fear when they hear police chiefs saying, just comply. They have no fear. And in terms
if anything, they feel emboldened. If anything, if you're already a criminal who's thinking about doing this stuff, and you just saw a police chief on TV tell people to just comply, you're like, you know what? I feel even more jacked up about this burglary I was planning next week. Do you not? Like, just to get into the mind of a criminal, like, I feel like that's a pretty emboldening message from a police chief. Just comply. Wow.
Yeah, well, and I mean, this isn't the first time I've heard this. Wasn't there somewhere else? Maybe it was York Region the previous time, where they were saying,
just leave your car keys out.
Just leave your car keys by the front door so they can just take your car.
Insane. And yeah, like you said it best. I think if a homeowner did have the freedom to use lethal force against someone who broke into their home, I think that would be a pretty strong incentive for burglars to be like, you know what, maybe I shouldn't break in, because maybe this will be my last break-in. Maybe there's going to be some dude with a hockey stick, and he's going to go, fill in the blank.
Well, and you do see that in countries where they've tried that. I don't have the statistics to hand, but I recall reading a few years ago, I mean, Brazil had a huge problem with home invasions. And under Bolsonaro, he greatly liberalized their firearms laws and self-defense laws, and break and enters plummeted.
There you go. Incentives. They work. Incredible. But I think the other thing that we wanted to talk about here is, and it's connecting two dots that people don't want to connect. And that is the rising crime with the rise in immigration, the rise of foreign people coming here and being across the nation, and also a rise in the criminal behavior. Yeah, I mean, do you have any statistics on hand that sort of that you try to show people when it comes to this pattern, or is it something that you kind of steer clear of? It is sort of, it makes sense why people are kind of afraid to connect these dots, but at the same time, it's like if you look at all these like police reports and you see the colors of the faces over and over and over again, it's people are starting to notice. Even liberal people are starting to notice. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I don't have any stats to hand. I probably should. I've done it in the past. I know I've looked at the statistics, but you can do a Google search and you'll find crime stats are on the rise generally. And there's a lot of things like violent crime being on the rise. And some people say, oh, well, this is just a pure coincidence that we're having this crime. Just pure coincidence that there's all this extreme numbers of immigration coinciding with the rise in crime. Now, I think it would be wrong to just say that, oh, it's just because it's all immigrants doing this crime. It's because we've got a lot of immigrants that it's happening. I mean, there's a lot of factors, right? I mean, a big piece is how it's destroying our economy of bringing in so many new people, so much more strain on infrastructure, putting rent through the roof. So you have people who are already here for a long time, homelessness, despair, getting into drug use, getting into all kinds of things. So there's a lot of different factors, but you keep coming back to I think the common denominator of what has changed, or I mean, one of the big changes. I think there's a few changes, but one big change is, how many new people have come to this country in the last few years? Because I mean, it's not like we're talking about small numbers. I mean, the population of Canada in 2020 was 32 million. Now it's 42 million. There was maybe 33 or 34 million in 2020, but I mean, it's absolutely surged, and it's not because there's been some big baby boom.
Yeah, it's it's quite. I saw a clip actually before going live, and it was a clip of. It was like a man on the street thing, and it was I don't know. The one guy had a Pakistani shirt on, the other guy looked East Indian, and he was like, "What's the craziest thing you saw at like Ridgetown Mall or something like that?" And the guy described how like a group of guys like ran up on a woman, and like it was a battery ting or something, and it's like, did you see a rape? And he was like, "Yeah, I wish I would have like joined in or something." It's like what? And this is just an example of something I see where it's like. Because I try to be very diplomatic when talking about these things, but like I'll see some clips and I'll think to myself, maybe I'm not racist enough. Like what the hell was that? Like is that a common attitude that people have from Pakistan? It's quite alarming. And then again, now that I say this out loud, maybe that's actually an approach for the stats, is to actually get stats in the countries where these people are coming from. And say, hey, look how common this is. Look at the laws around this in Pakistan or in India. And these 40% of the people coming in are from India. So could that have to do with, the rise in this type of crime? And while we're actually talking about this, Dominion Society is working on collecting as many stats as we can to connect these dots between crime and immigration, just to create as much urgency as possible. So if you have any tips, then please send them to info@dominionsociety.ca, because like you said, we don't want to just make, it's just because I'm immigrants, blah, 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 blah. Like we're not trying to lie, or we're not trying to kind of like, be unnecessarily, hyperbolic or anything like this. We want to have the credibility of having the stats and the truth and the facts on our side when we're going to be kind of connecting dots like this. So if you do have any stats, if you do have any tips, info@dominionsociety.ca, send us an email with a link, some stats anything that has kind of some credible research or sort of, methodology behind the statistics would be fantastic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think data is always crucial because I think that's one thing that people often criticize our government for, the people that are doing policy. You know, they never want to talk about the actual statistics or the actual data. It's more about, you know, feelings or their moral
Well,
view of what's right to do, regardless of what the actual facts are.
have you ever looked at Canadian crime statistics? I only tried to look at it once on StatsCan. And if I recall correctly, the way they break down like race or ethnicity was really odd to me. I could be wrong, but like I'm pretty sure I did this like a year or two ago, and they had like the wildest different categories. Like I feel like they had like 4 or 8 different like First Nations ethnicities, like indigenous ethnicities. Like that was broken down into like, 4 or 5 different categories of like all these different specific type of indigenous races. And then like only a few others besides that. Like it was grossly overrepresented in terms of the options of the different ethnicities. A whole bunch of them were different, like indigenous ethnicities, which, I mean, if you look at the stats in, I think, Saskatchewan of like how often the crime is being done by like natives, I've heard it's quite alarming. But again, this is not stuff that I've dug deep into, and a little bit different from Remigration, but still interesting stuff.
Yeah, well, there's a whole there's a lot going on, but of course the numbers are only as good as the reporting as well, right? So, for crime rates, I that would require people to be reporting things to the police. That would require the police to be laying charges. So, I mean, that's another thing. The statistics, they're not, they may not be always reliable. So, for example, if you looked up statistics, they would probably say that zero Christian churches have been criminally burnt down in Canada over the last several years, right? The arson in Canada is not arson in Christian churches is not a problem because the police haven't made a single arrest. So they haven't proved that these are actually arsons. But I think when you see, obviously that's happened, right? I think it's over 200 now.
200 churches burning down?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, really? I thought the number was hanging around like 140 or something like this. I didn't realize it was that high. But speaking of that, because I have a direct sort of example of like how are the statistics reported. Anthony Housefather, August 31st, he posted this letter talking about the safety of Jewish Canadians. And in the letter, he talked, what was the stat? Let me find it. Right now, Jews make up slightly more than 1% of Canada's population, but are the victims of 70% of reported religious-based acts of hate. And I thought, I commented and I actually ratioed him. I said over 100 churches have burnt down in Canada over the past few years, and Christian singers get routinely banned from performing. Not to mention the statues that are toppled of our Christian historical figures like Sir John A. Macdonald, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Like, is that form of hatred factored into that 70% figure? Like, are we not counting? Why wouldn't we count Sir John A. Macdonald as a Christian who's being attacked by Antifa? Is that not an act of hate? Is like these over 100 churches burning down? Is that how, if Jews are targeted 70% of the time, like how big is the percentage? What was the methodology of collecting this? Of these
well,
stats?
the methodology, and what is considered? What is their definition, or what do they consider a hate crime? They're probably considering what's been charged. I can tell you, in 20 years as a criminal lawyer, I've yet to see anyone charged with hate crime against a Christian.
Yeah.
And it's disproportionately certain groups where you get charged. I mean, just because you're speaking specifically about Jews, no other group has a law specific to them making it a crime to in any way downplay, although they don't define what they mean by downplay, but to downplay an event from their history where they were victims of persecution. Like so the Holocaust, right? That was a private member's bill from the Conservative Party of Canada. You're not allowed to downplay any aspect, and I've said I had problems with that because it's so vaguely worded. I don't know what they're outlawing because it's so vaguely worded, but they have that. So of course you're going to get more crimes when they're the only group. Like if someone denied the Armenian genocide in Turkey, that's not a crime. So of course that's not going to show up in their statistics. Or if someone denied the Holodomor, the death by starvation of millions of Ukrainians by the Soviet Union, that's never going to show up in hate crime statistics because it's not a crime to say that didn't happen, or to say that, well, they deserved it, so Stalin was right to do that. Perfectly legal to say that. So, I mean, that's got to skew the statistics as well when one group has a very law specific to them that no one else has.
Yeah. And I saw, actually, just while we're on this topic, I saw a tweet. Some guy in the States said something along the lines of like, oh man, when you come out to support Israel, like you get so much hatred for it. And like, no one ever talks about the hatred that Israel gets. And I'm like, hold on. And I actually asked Grok, and I asked Grok, out of all identifiable racial and religious groups, which group has the largest number of speech laws across Western countries that are uniquely and specifically written in regards to that specific group's identity? Give me a one-word answer. And even Grok was like, Jews, because there's specific Holocaust laws across the board in a whole bunch of different white Western countries. So it's like, not only are people talking about the hatred towards Jewish people, but like they have the most laws out of anybody specifically for them, or for something based on their identity, which is, as you mentioned, the Holocaust. But pretty interesting stuff.
Yeah, I guess you just, you said it in such a way so that the algorithms aren't going to shut down this video, but I already said it in the way that YouTube's probably going to pick up that I said that, and therefore you can't see the video or something, because I mean, we're not even talking about, we're just talking about the fact that there's a law making it illegal to deny, downplay, or justify.
And if Bill C-63 were in effect, this would count as a thought crime, right? This would make me or you a potential hater just based on talking about it.
I mean, if that one were in effect, I mean, right now we're not expressing any opinions. I'm just saying that's the law. I'm saying I have concerns because it's so vague that I don't know what's actually illegal under that, because the Holocaust is very vaguely denied. So I don't know. But anyway, I did a whole episode on that. We don't need to go into that in any more detail. But I don't want to keep you too long. I'm greatly enjoying our discussion, but I'm sure you've got places to be. I've got places to be. But just to talk about remigration a little bit more.
Sure.
People probably know what we're talking about, but maybe if you could give a little quick synopsis of what do you mean when you say that, or what's the Dominion Society pushing for when they say that that's something that they're advocating for?
Yeah, absolutely. So what is remigration? A lot of people ask this question. And well, let's first talk about immigration policy. Immigration right now in Canada, we have a robust immigration policy that has everything from the refugee program, the temporary foreign workers program, the family reunification program, the international students program. There's the point system with the immigration system. And those robust policies right now, they all incentivize foreigners to come here and exploit our social services. There's a lot of other kind of sort of incentives, but right now it's kind of like really easy to take advantage of these policies as a foreign person to show up and to start exploiting our social services. So that's like, obviously relying on our healthcare system, whatever it is. Remigration is simply taking the immigration policies we have and reversing those incentives. So changing the different programs, changing the kind of the how they're structured, how they work, and creating them so they incentivize people for foreigners to return to their homeland or to not exploit our social services. And there's a lot of really great things in there, because a lot of, not a lot, but there's definitely a trend of immigrants coming here or foreigners coming here, working, and then siphoning all of the money back home, siphoning all the money they make back home. There's instances of immigrants or foreigners coming here, not assimilating at all, not even trying to assimilate, and just kind of doing their own thing. That's not what we should want as a country. We should want people to learn French or English. This isn't really complicated stuff. And Quebec has done some things that allude to that. And we actually at Dominion Society, we steal a few things from Quebec and what they've been doing. And like, let's make that nationwide. Let's make that federally across the country. But I do kind of want to get your opinion on this, because I don't know if you've read our 10-step remigration plan, but you can check it out at our website, dominionsociety.ca. Just click on what is remigration, go to the bottom of the page. There's a 10-step remigration plan there. But some people have read this and they're like, this is authoritarian. And it's like, I guess like wanting to change the law and then enforce it is authoritarian, I guess. I didn't really understand kind of why people were calling it authoritarian. But I do think that's something that, this is kind of a sidebar. Like, I do think that like some right-wing people who are libertarian, they get kind of caught up in this idea that, we shouldn't use the law. Like we just need less laws. And like, sometimes I agree, but in terms of course correcting with something that's been totally messed up so badly, like mass immigration and multiculturalism, it's like, actually, we need to use the law to correct the situation. And we should not be afraid to do that. And yeah, let's get it done. It's time to pack.
Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of things there. The whole authoritarian thing. I mean, I think libertarianism, I think, got a big boost from COVID-19 because they saw what went on. Oh, that's authoritarian, therefore authoritarian bad, like just
Right.
all the time. And you'd see things like the Freedom Convoy, which was there. I mean, frankly, it was, the anarcho-capitalist dream of how they think society would work if anarcho-capitalism was actually a thing. I think it was very particular to those circumstances. You look through history, anarchy never, there's always someone's going to come in. I think I don't think authoritarianism is really that bad of a thing. I'm in favor of more limited government, but there's a difference between an authoritarian government and one that's more limited. We have authoritarian and broad reaching. Sometimes you need authoritarianism. I mean, we're talking about actually enforcing the law or putting criminals in for lengthier sentences. Well, arguably that's authoritarian, right? Because if you're living anarcho-capitalism, there are no law courts. There's no police. There's no laws. It's just complete people doing whatever they want. So,
you want me to have a driver's license? That's authoritarian. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I mean, but as you say, enforcing the laws we actually have, that's not I don't think that's authoritarian. I mean, I think the whole authoritarian thing gets thrown around when people don't like the law that's being enforced, but then they're okay with authoritarian in other things. I think that goes back to how wide ranging or what areas the government is authoritarian in. So I agree government should be more limited. But in terms of your 10-point plan, the interesting thing is I think step 2 of your plan is actually is already being talked about by the Liberal Party of Canada. Unfortunately, they're skipping over step 1, but which is a total moratorium on immigration, which I think needs to be done. I mean, that's not authoritarian. That's just, look, we got a situation, we've got to deal with it. So let's put the brakes on so we can figure out what's going on and stabilize the situation. Abolishing the temporary foreign worker program. As I said, there's already talk about that happening from the government. Restricting birthright citizenship. There's nothing authoritarian about that. That's just, I think a country has a right to determine how you become a citizen. That's any group of people have the right to determine how you become a member of that group. So a country is just that writ large. Making Canada less affordable for immigrants, arguably that's anti-authoritarian because we're talking about less government subsidies. Like if you look at it from that perspective, right? You could look at it from like, well, you can make it less comfortable without actually being discriminatory towards people. It's actually the opposite. You just treat everyone the same. Like, I mean, my wife's an immigrant. Her family fled communism to come here, but guess what? They didn't get a dime. They had to pay the government back for their flight, even though they're refugees. They had to take a loan from the Canadian government and pay it back. And none of the incentives that are around now existed back in the 80s. So they just showed up and they had to work like everyone else. So I would argue that's less comfortable than what the current situation is. You can find all kinds of quick Google search. You'll find all kinds of the job subsidies that are given to companies to make it easier for them to get jobs than for people who are Canadian citizens. And there's lots of these resettlement things. You've got refugee claimants living in hotels. I mean, those are all things that actually, by scaling back government, that's less authoritarian. I mean, those are just the first 4 points, but the phase 2 is when you start getting into the remigration, revocation of permanent residency, mass deportations, voluntary repatriation program. Now, that's where we're starting to get a little bit more spicy, perhaps. But I mean, I think the whole revocation of permanent residency, that could be done to so many people right now, just with the current laws that we have. And I'll just show this quickly, just to look at Government of Canada reasons you may be inadmissible to Canada. So just looking at the current laws, you could be inadmissible if you committed a crime. Well, as we know from what were the statistics last year, the Canadian Armed Forces, when they started taking non-citizens for the first time, over 100,000 people applied. Like something like 1,500 were accepted because everyone else failed the screening check that the Canadian Armed Forces has. So that makes me think there's a lot of people that haven't been properly screened by Remigration Canada or screened at all. You could probably get rid of a bunch of, have a lot of people that would be deemed inadmissible for a criminal record. Now, medical reasons is an interesting one, because if your medical situation causes excessive demand on health or social services.
Oh, wow.
So, I mean, I think everyone would agree there's some excessive demand going on our health and social services right now. That could be a reason that you could deem all sorts of people would be inadmissible. And then financial reasons, if you're unable or unwilling to support yourself and your family members. Now, a lot of them have jobs, but there may be people that don't have jobs. Misrepresentation, false information. I mean, I don't know if you saw that CBC thing where within 5 minutes, CBC was able to get a bunch of fake job offers to get visas under false pretenses to come to Canada. I don't know if you remember seeing that one. Or even just having a family member who's inadmissible. So these are under the current laws. I'm sure.
And for context, what page are you on here? Like what is this? This is specifically for
I'll put the link here in the
immigration,
chat.
Citizenship, live in Canada, find out if you're inadmissible.
Find out if you're admissible.
Okay. There you have it. There you have it, folks.
I mean, that's just a summary. Obviously, I'm not going into the actual Immigration Act, but I think we can rely on the government website. In fact, that's a principle in law, that you can rely on official publications of the government to understand what the law is. So just from that quick review there, I think a number of the parts of the Dominion Society's plan there could be done without even changing the current laws, just enforcing in a perhaps more strict or robust way the laws that are currently on the books.
Absolutely. And this kind of goes back to it's funny how the conversation kind of gets twisted around, right? Like as I mentioned, there's been some people in the right-wing space who call themselves right-wing, who are like, oh, this is authoritarian, or this is like a white ethno thing. And it's like, folks, there are hundreds of thousands of people who are overstaying their visas, and if we want to enforce those laws, we need to deport them. And there's like very little willingness to enforce the existing laws. So this represents like a much, much bigger problem, where it's like, if we're going to have these laws and not enforce them, then what do the laws even mean? What does this country even mean? And like, really, it's about building that backbone because like if we don't have that backbone, we're just going to continue to get, sorry to use the language, but like invaded by foreign people who are going to be exploiting our sort of lack of a backbone, our jellyfish kind of doormat nature. And that's exactly what needs to change. And that's why I think simultaneously asserting who we are as a country, who we are as a nation, starting with our history, is important, because it starts with that, like the self-respect of that fact, of that truth as the foundation. And the natural thing after that is like, that's why we need to enforce these laws to protect that.
Yeah. And it's, the word racism's come up a lot during this podcast, because that's always the accusation. But in my view, I haven't heard, neither of us have said anything about that we hate people from other countries. It's just, you're allowed to have your own country. And I always return to that. Like, how would this conversation be taken if it was taking place in another country? Or like, they always talk about, colonialism in Africa, all these white people moved to Africa. Well, you're saying that's bad. Aren't you saying it's bad for people to be displacing the population that's already there? Now they would turn it around and say, well, that applies to Canada because Canada was all stolen. I mean, that's a whole other topic that we don't have time to get into in terms of the history of Canada and how many people actually lived here, how much of the land was unoccupied, how all the treaties panned out, and
how many roads were there, how many towns were there, how many buildings were there, how many structures were there, where did they come from? We
don't have time to get, I mean, you could do a whole 2-hour episode probably just talking about the history, which isn't taught in schools. So people don't, I mean, you'll get a few sound bites from CBC, but I don't think very many people have actually looked into like the actual, like what actually happened. Read some of these actual treaties, read some firsthand accounts, read things that were going on.
There's a lot of epic things in Canadian history, and I hope to learn a lot more about it, because I think I'm actually a great example of a bad example. Like I'm a great example of a bad example. And I mean that as in like, I grew up, I'm 36 now, but I grew up like in the 90s, and through the education system, I can tell you offhand, it was Canada's a cultural mosaic. Juno Beach, Vimy Ridge, and then pretty quickly it goes straight into like, we had brave soldiers in World War II, upper Canada, lower Canada, maybe heard a little bit about that. And then honestly, it goes straight into the heritage minutes that you mentioned, maple syrup, hockey, poutine. Like it goes straight, like after those like few touch points, it goes straight into like sort of this, very shallow version of understanding what it means to be Canadian, not one that's based in history. And not one, like, here's another thing that relates to that. There's a beautiful park called Algonquin Park in Ontario, probably the best place for camping and canoe camping in definitely in Ontario. And there's a really highly recommend this hike. It's called like the Track and Tower hike. But when you go on this hike in Algonquin Park, you can just drive in, drive out. But when you go on this hike, you can get a little like brochure that kind of explains different parts on the hike. And there was a highly trafficked railroad that was going right through Algonquin Park back in the day that had like so much lumber that was going towards, I guess, like somewhere the St. Lawrence. And it was for the war effort. And it's crazy because like you look around, you don't see the railroad at all. But like just to hear about like the logging industry in Canada and how robust and intense it was. And it's like, this is something that connects me to this country and connects me to the land. It's like Algonquin Park is doing a better job at making me feel like a proud Canadian, much more so than the CBC is, but like, things like that, I really want to learn more about, because I think it just kind of connects the beautiful landscape to the beautiful people who helped develop the nation. It kind of like it marries those two things. Because conquering this wicked landscape is quite the task that we should feel very proud of. And I think that is a very foundational thing about our identity that we need to not only talk about more, but kind of be more assertive about and try to honor in everything that we do.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's a great place to end off. I think we've covered a lot of ground here, and yeah, I think that's, going kind of circling back to the positivity and learning who we are, where we came from, and cherishing that, because Canada has a much richer history than I'm sure a lot of people would even guess. Even maybe it hasn't been around as long as places like France or China or Japan or Germany, but, well, although arguably Germany is actually younger than Canada from a certain perspective. Because Germany and Italy both didn't become countries as we know them until after Canada was a country. But yeah, so thanks for joining us, Greg. We're going to have the link to the Dominion Society in the show description, so we invite people to have a look at that. And so Greg's on the board of directors. I don't want any false advertising. I'm not in any capacity affiliated with the Dominion Society, so I just say that because I don't want to be trying to steal any thunder from you or having people thinking that I'm helping run it, but it's something of interest. So I wanted to have you on the show to talk about it. And I think we had a great discussion. So thanks for joining me and having this chat.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me, Nicholas. And yeah, we appreciate anyone who wants to kind of learn more about Dominion Society. I think it's the beginning of something very significant. One of my tasks as a board member is calling in new members. I'm talking to CEOs. I'm talking to, white collar workers, blue collar workers, young men in university, majoring in poli-science, becoming lawyers. It's a lot of focused people who love this country. And they also see like the long term. They see the long term kind of plan in what we're doing. And, there's been a lot of long-term. Let's try that again. There's been a lot of long-term damage that's happened to the country. It's going to take a long-term solution to rectify things.
Yeah. So I've got to do my lawyerly disclaimer. Of course, no legal advice was given in this live stream. We're just having a conversation. If you need legal advice, call a lawyer. Call me if you want me to be the lawyer that you need some advice from. And we're always open to suggestions, guests you'd like to see us have on, or any topics you'd like to see us cover. So please send those to the email address we got going on the screen right now. And please, I forgot to pump this during the show, but we've got lots of people, I think, following Greg here. If you liked our chat and have a look at some of our other content, please like, share, and subscribe. And thanks again for watching.